When people are faced with eviction, having a lawyer can make a huge difference. That's why housing advocates are backing legislation that would establish a right to counsel for indigent homeowners or renters. To tell us about the measure is one of the supporters, a staff attorney with the Massachusetts Law Reform Institute, Annette Duke. Thank you very much for being with us, Annette.
Thank you for having me.
And that right now in Boston, the way the housing market is going, it wouldn't be surprising to hear a lot of people are faced with evictions. Offhand, how many of them you think have lawyers to represent them?
Well, statewide, 93% of tenants who go into housing court are unrepresented. They're facing an eviction all by themselves. They're scared, they're alone. As compared to landlords, 70% of the landlords do have a lawyer. So there's an incredible disparate nature in terms of who's represented and who's unrepresented, and the deck is certainly stacked against the tenants when they walk in.
Why is it that having a lawyer makes so much difference?
Well, the process moves very quickly for an eviction. There are a lot of papers to file, there are complicated rules. There are procedures that you would never know about. There are rights that most people have no idea until they see an attorney that they even have. So, you know, it's a very quick moving process, and people come in, they don't know what the form actually means when they come in. Some people actually never make it in because they don't understand the form.
Of course, maybe even at an earlier stage before you actually go to court, some people get a letter in the mail and they think they have to just bail out of their apartment right away. And I guess having a lawyer who can say, wait a minute, just calm down, it's not going to be that quickly, isn't that important too?
Absolutely. You know, before a complaint is filed in court, and you're talking about what's called a notice to quit, you get at that first stage, you don't have to move. You get that notice. And there's a lot of things that can be done before a case goes to court to prevent that eviction from happening. That's actually what our right to counsel is very interested in doing, is not only providing people with lawyers, but really thinking about how to provide support for that whole continuum of services that happened before to keep someone housed. It's really about housing stability.
When you say services, what would that mean, you think?
Well, for example, people who are disabled, or people who are seniors who may need support services, or they're not paying the rent and need some help paying the rent, or having someone cut the check. There's a lot of different ways that people may have an obstacle in terms of paying the rent, or that may lead to an eviction notice, and that some kind of support can help prevent that. And there's services out there to do that.
Now, I imagine there might be some cases, whether it's because a property owner has some real problems with a tenant, or maybe because there's just this affordability gap that's involved. People are going to end up having to move. So how does an attorney somehow make that work out better, even if it has to happen that way?
Well, if it has to happen, typically what happens is you go to court and you may sign an agreement. And what happens if you don't have a lawyer is that tenants are signing bad agreements. They're signing agreements where they move out very quickly, or they agree to terms that they can't live up to. But having a lawyer can help you shape a really good agreement that gives you some time to move for a better landing or services. So there's a lot of things that can be done even if the tenant does need to move.
This is BNN News, and we're talking with Annette Duke from the Massachusetts Law Reform Institute. And of course, the other thing that's important here is no matter what the outcome as far as where people live, avoiding an eviction is very important. And explain that, because what does an eviction mean legally for a person going forward?
Well, an eviction is not only an eviction, but an eviction could obviously lead to losing your home. It could mean you lose your job. It could mean you lose your kids. It could mean you lose all the support services or the neighborhood that you've been living in for 26 years.
Or if you're a renter trying to go to another landlord.
So that is also an issue. If you, when a case is filed, you have what is we call an eviction record. And landlords are using that eviction record, regardless what the outcome is, and automatically denying tenants a place to live. So that brands someone with an eviction record that can hurt them to find their next place to live.
Now, some viewers might think an eviction case is fairly simple, but you and I are both familiar with one case at 6 Humphreys Place in Dorchester near Upham's Corner. Explain what's involved, because you don't just go in and out in half an hour and it's over with. It's an ordeal, isn't it?
Oh yeah, I mean, you know, what happens from the tenant's perspective is that they are required to file what's called an answer. And I've actually worked on producing a plain language answer for years, which is actually no longer plain language because it's so complicated. You know, all the tenants' rights that people have, they don't understand. And so filling out these forms can be very intimidating, complicated. You know, if someone doesn't fill out the right form, but they have actually a right to stay in their place and they're evicted, that's tragic.
And it might take more than one day, too, to get a case fleshed out in court.
Right. If there's a jury trial, it could go on. There could be motions. Although I have to say, most cases move very quickly through the system. So most cases, the day you come to court, and again, because if you don't have representation, you don't know what your rights are, so you don't know what to fight for.
Now, I know if this legislation passes, there would be a right to counsel for indigent people, but I'm wondering, where does the money come from for the lawyers?
So hopefully Massachusetts will be the first state in the country that will pass a right to counsel, and when that happens, we will then fight for the money that will need to support that. It needs to be new money. We can't do it with the existing funds now. You know, at this point, legal services is turning away about 2/3 of the people that come to them. So we need new resources to do this. But it's also it's more than lawyers. Again, it's about building the capacity of these groups before a case is filed to help them prevent an eviction. You know, because the sooner we get in, the sooner we can resolve the problem and the outcomes are better.
Now, of course, this is backed by a whole coalition. We can't name everybody, but anything in particular we should know about this coalition?
Yes, well, at this point we have over 100 organizations that are supporting the right to counsel, includes teachers, social workers, the Boston mayor, Somerville mayor, many municipalities. Municipalities have passed resolutions, police officers. It's a very broad coalition that really cares about this because housing is so central to all of us and everything.
Thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you.
Annette Duke from the Mass Law Reform Institute.